work session to order. You all rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. If you could turn and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. We will start with the call of the roll of the office or the council members.
Lehman. Here. Hodak.
Here.
Cassidy.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Mendoza. Lake.
Here. We're all present. The only thing on the business tonight is the work session for the financial recovery plan for next year as a draft proposal. So we will go ahead and get into that. And when we're finished, we will make a motion for adjournment. Awesome.
All right. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cindy McCafferty with the State Auditors, Local Government Services, where it's that time of year again to update the recovery plan. So everyone should have a copy. We're going to take the approach a little bit different this year. We're going to start on page 3. And starting at the table there, these are assumptions that have been put in place in prior years for the recovery plan or assumptions that are going to be put in place going forward. So if we start with number 1, that talks about your inside millage for property taxes, you're going to 4.2 inside millage in the general fund and 0.3 mils in police pension and 0.3 mils in fire pension. Hasn't changed. Assume that for the 5 years. The next one talks about when the last sexennial update was done. It was done in 23. Collection began in 24 for that. And the next scheduled update is to happen in 2026. If we go to page 4, that number 3 talks about the 6 mil operating levy. The voters approved that in May of 22. Which began collection in 23, and in the forecast, it's assumed that voters will renew that. Number 4 talks about the income tax levy, where voters approved that in May of 21, and it began collection in 22. Again, it ends in 26, and in the forecast, it's assuming that will be renewed as well. Number 5 and 6. Have been in there in past recovery plans where the city joined RETA. You're going to continue to use RETA. And then it also talks about reducing the reciprocity in 17 by 50% and 100% in 2018. For income tax, the projected increase in the forecast is 2% a year. For number 8 and 9, they kind of go together. There's a few funds where a fund may supplement another fund because it may start to run into deficit. So for the first one, you'll find that your state highway doesn't have enough money, so the permissive fund is going to supplement that fund. Number 9 has to deal with transfers. There's a few funds that won't have enough money, and that the general fund will supplement those funds, basically. Number 10, we'll discuss when we get there that there is built in a rate increase for both water and sewer for the forecast period. It's also in the forecast that salaries are going to be adjusted in accordance to the union agreements. There is also an increase for healthcare costs. You can see right now it's 8% in 25 and 10% from 26 through 29. I think we've got locked in the 25 at 8%, is that correct? But going through forward forecast, it's just projected 10%. Number 13 has been in there about the pool, about not operating the pool. There's modest increases that you'll see for contractual services anywhere from 2 to 10%. And then if we go to number 15, same for materials and supplies, anywhere from 3 to 7%. Number 16, we're going to go to that next. There's a detailed list of capital needs that the administration got together of things over the next 5 years that the city will need for capital items, which we'll look at. And then 17 through 24 are projected grants that the city has either already has already been approved for, have already locked down those grants, or grants that they are projecting to receive. And it's also included in there is a couple of loans, like Ohio Public Works loan on those kinds of things. So number 17 through 24, those are specific grants, and we'll relate some. Those will be related on the capital needs that you'll see that apply to capital items. So with those assumptions, we're going to start with the capital needs. So flip to page 60. So on page 60 and 61, this is a list of capital needs that the the administration has put together by department, by fund, of items over the next 5 years, of whether it's equipment, vehicles, whatnot. It's a detail item. You can see the departments. Those are the various departments within the general fund, and then also by fund, items that have been identified. You will see on some of this stuff, if there is a grant that's associated with that capital, there's in parentheses, it'll say a grant, and typically it's trying to identify which grant. Or if it's a project where there is a grant as well as a local portion, that's identified as well. There is a few modifications that we made this afternoon in discussing. One of them being in the street fund. The McDougal project, we didn't account for, there's a grant associated with it, but we didn't account for the local portion. The city will have a local portion. So this will be updated for your next council, or when you do the first reading on this, it will be updated. But you need to add $328,550 to the street fund for year 2025. 328,550 in the street fund.
And you're still on page 50?
I'm on page 60.
60.
Yeah, that will be the local portion for this McDougal project for streets.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, it's 328,550. It's actually on 60. That's general. That's the capital. This one's actually going to be in the street fund. Okay.
So if you look at page 60, you have the funds coming down to one side.
Yeah. So
And you get down to the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing? Yeah, you're
Yep.
looking at your PDF.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wrong page. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Didn't think about that. But yeah, so that's something that was added this afternoon. So it's been updated in the detail, but that's a project that was added. The other thing that was added, so there is a portage. If we look under park at the bottom of page 60, under park, there is a project that says, I crossed it out, Portage Park. It's for the tee boxes. It was for $5,000. That needs to be crossed out. That is not going to happen. But what we replaced it with, that I missed, was a Portage Park for a shelter roof. I didn't write down the roof on that one.
35,000.
Yeah. So we need to add 35,000 into that. And again, that will be updated on the copy.
Is that going in 2025 as well?
2025, yes.
And once again, what was that? Portage Park what?
Shelter roof.
Yes. Right now, nothing's been secured, locked down, but yes.
Hoping for a grant from Hancock County.
Yeah. So if you look at this page, like if you look under the department, under the side on page 60, you'll see under fire, you'll see the SCBA. There's a FEMA grant that's for part of that equipment, but there's a local portion. So that is the city's local portion for that equipment. Another one, if you look down under street, you'll see Central Avenue. And that is going to be an OPWC project where there is grant dollars, there's loan dollars, but there's also a local portion. So the one that's showing in the street is the local portion for the city. And then under, you see the Hancock Park grant, that was grant dollars received for that. And then under park, you'll see under the splash pad, there was grants and donations for that have been locked in for that. And there's also another grant that I don't know if it's been secured, but for the signage and picnic tables. I don't know if it's applying for that. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it's, but there's a grant for that one. And then under the FEMA fire grant fund, you see the Station Bay exhaust system. That is the FEMA grant. So that's all being paid for grant dollars. So we go to page 61. There's the rest of the capital. The change on that one is on the top under Capital Street. You'll see the McDougal widening and repaving grant. That number needs to change to $400,000 rather than $500,000. And that's grant dollars.
Total cost of that project on the Cuban is $728,000. $400,000 through this grant, council here, and then the $328,000 we talked about adding, so we had to make the revision.
Go ahead and scroll down because again, there's some grants, but this is the rest of the projects for, you can see water, sewer, stormwater. Go ahead and take, because this, now when you see these, this is the detail. When we start looking at some of these funds, this will tie to capital outlay line item when we get to the funds. They will, although they may not tie now with the revisions I just gave you, but they will when you receive the updated copy. This is the detail of capital outlay.
One item to note is if you look at the total water, we're going to invest $2.3 million next year in investment in infrastructure and things for the water plant. So understand a significant portion of our $10 million that we're going to invest next year is going to the water side of things. And that's going to be an ongoing theme, I think, as we go out many more years. We just don't know what all those are going to be, but we can tell you next year we're going to invest $2.3 million in water plant and distribution.
Any questions on capital needs before we start looking at the funds? All right. So we're going to go back to page 6, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these funds. I'll tell you what page we're at, but feel free to flip through. I'll give you time to flip through, look at those funds that we don't, but they're small and not very significant. But we're going to start with page 6, which is the general fund. And if you look at it for the forecasting property taxes, all that was forecasted was basically what you received in 24, the same amount is projected for the 5 years. Could it change a little bit? Absolutely. Could it go up? Yes, but we're taking a conservative approach. So that's why you see it constant. Income taxes, that's where you can see a modest 2% increase for the 5 years each year. The state levied share taxes, that is the local government monies that the city receives monthly. Don't know where the state budget is going. So again, conservative approach, what you've received this year, assume that the city's gonna receive the same amount. Intergovernmental is basically homestead and rollback that you get off the property tax settlement sheets, as well as there's a liquor license and cigarette tax settlement sheets. So again, forecasted what was received in 24 to stay conservative. Other local taxes is the bed tax the city receives. Charges for services is made up of a bunch of items. So basically went with nothing significant change, went with pretty much what was anticipated to receive in 24. So that number could go up, but again, taking the conservative approach on that for that and licenses, permits, as well as fines and forfeitures. And then interest, I mean, that one's kind of a ballpark guess. Interest is done very, very well for the city this past year, even in 23. So it's just kind of a ballpark, but we kind of were trying to remain conservative because who knows in 5 years, you know, interest rates could start falling. But we were trying to stay conservative on that. And then that other revenue category is basically reimbursements from other funds. So for instance, your DARE fund, your school resource officer fund, police salaries are being paid out of the general fund, but these are funds for police officer salaries. So those funds are reimbursing the general fund back for those salaries. So that's what's sitting in other revenue. Personal services, you see an increase, and that's based upon salaries and benefits, the rates that are what's in the agreements now, as well as, like I said, the healthcare cost percentage increase is included in that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Would you, I have questions as we.
Yeah, if you have
prefer
questions,
as we
stop
go.
me. Yeah, please.
Okay, so in fiscal year 25,
Mhm.
you have 7,221,000,
Mhm.
and you've only increased by 8,000 in fiscal year 26, which doesn't make sense to me.
The reason why in 25, there is several police, fire, set projected retirements.
Okay,
And that's why 25 is so large. And so you don't see that increase.
because we don't see the history, we can't connect those dots. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So really, you probably have more like a 5 or 6% increase in there, but
Depends upon the departments because
wages.
the general fund is made up of a variety of departments.
okay.
But what's driving in total that you don't see as much of an increase is because that increase that's happening, you don't have that severance payment in 26.
Okay. So fiscal year 25 is inflated.
Because there's several retirements anticipated.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
we put them in the budget the year they're eligible for it. That does not mean they're necessarily retiring.
Right.
But we know it's coming,
Right.
so.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Contractual services, if you look, there's a decrease from 25 to 26. There is in 25 a higher contractual service cost for the long-term control plan as well as the emergency action plan that's projected to happen in 25 that you won't have going forward in the forecast period. Supplies and materials and all the rest of them, not really much to say about those. You will see the capital outlay line item that those numbers will tie to that capital list that we just looked at for the general fund. The advances and transfers. So you guys have several grants that are reimbursable grants. So what that means is that in order for you to get the grant dollars, there has to be a cash flow. You have to spend the money up front. So for instance, your FEMA grant, your arborist grant, your FAA grant, those require you spend the money up front. And so you can't spend it if there's no cash flow. So the general fund has to advance money to those funds so there's cash flow. And once the grant dollars are received, then those grant funds will advance the money back to the general fund. So that's what you see there in advances in and advances out. That's made up of all those three different grants. And then the transfers out income taxes, the 600,000 that's the voters approved. And then the transfers out is made up of the bulk of that is made up of transfers the general fund supplements your police and fire pension funds because you only collect a total of 0.6 mils of property tax to pay the police and fire pension retirements. That was years ago where only you got 0.3 mils. Everybody got 0.3 mils. I don't know how many years ago that was, but years ago. So you don't receive enough money and property taxes. So the general fund has to supplement that and transfer the money from the general fund to that that police and fire pension. So you'll see that when we get to that fund. Mhm.
If it was a pass.
A question back on that contractual services.
Mhm.
Can you go through that one more time? Why that drops?
So in 2025, it's projected there's about 250,000.
We have $250,000 in contractual services uh, in 2025, 150,000 for the long-term control plan modeling we talked about. We moved 125,000 this year into contractual services. We have another 150,000 on that monitoring and control plan modeling next year. And then there's also $100,000 we're required to put an emergency action plan together for the city because we have reservoirs. We have to put a plan in place in case those reservoirs were to fail. So as part, that's not really a water fund expense, that's a citywide expense. And so we put that $100,000 to do that emergency action plan also in contractual services.
So you obviously won't have that plan in 26. So that's why you see the drop. So
That makes sense, Bob?
Yeah, but we're pretty fortunate we have the money to put that in there now.
Correct,
mhm.
correct.
Could have been 3 years ago when it was due.
Yeah, go back 6 years and there's no way you even pay for it. So, yeah.
So with the changes on that capital that we went through, it's affected that transfers out number. So the fund balance that you guys have on there aren't correct, but the changes really are not significant. So if we look out for the 5 years forecasted, what we typically like to see is about a 3-month carryover of operating carryover. And general fund, the more, I don't want to say the more, but it's good to have a nice healthy balance because it's an unrestricted, you never know what's going to happen. Obviously, for, this long-term plan, you can put it into the general fund. So with looking through the 5 years, you're looking at it's almost anywhere from a 10 to 11 month carryover. So the general fund is looking very, very good. Is there any more questions on the general fund? Ready to move on? Okay. So we're going to go page 7 to the street fund. Again, this fund is going to change with that capital change we just did. So the street project that we added for the local, it now is going to make this street fund turn into a deficit fund balance. So we're right now on your copy, you see a fund balance at the very end for 25 and 26. By adding that local portion now, it's caused it to go into a deficit. So the general fund is going to have to supplement this fund. And that's not unreasonable. A lot of municipalities do not collect enough gas and motor vehicle license. And that's the revenue that you see up here under the state shared levy taxes. That's gas and motor vehicle license. So the motor vehicle license is what you get from what the city gets from the sticker you renew, the gas taxes from the pump. 92.5% is required to go into this street fund. And then 7.5% is required to go into the state highway. That's by Ohio Constitution. Both of these funds also are required to receive interest. So that's why you see interest in there by the Constitution, that those funds have to receive interest. So again, we put some cost in there for interest. Now, there is a modification I just saw on that where I have interest in there because through the forecasted period, this fund balance is going to be assumed 0 for all 5 years, just to zero it out. It hasn't happened yet, but this is the projection on it. Page 8, we kind of just talked about same thing with street. Now we're on the state highway. This is the 7.5%. Again, on this fund, instead of the general fund supplementing, the permissive MVL, which will be on page 9, is allowed to supplement this fund. So that's what you see in other revenue up there. That is money coming from the permissive MVL fund to this fund. Okay, so it's just enough just to zero it out.
This is some of the money that's going to the paving project for next year comes out of this one.
Yeah, the paving, so if you look at that the capital, it's all, anything you see in capital outlay, that's where you'll go back to the capital needs and that's where it will tie. So there wasn't anything capital out of the state highway. Okay, so page 9 is the permissive MVO. And what this is that extra $5 tax that the city claimed on license tax, I don't know, years ago or whatnot. So this is that extra tax that you guys will get from the state. Again, it's required to receive interest. There is one capital project projected. If you again go back to look at that capital needs, you'll see the detail on that. And again, this fund is supplementing the state highway fund. So that's what you see in the other under the expenditure summary. And it's the fund balance kind of goes down in 25, but as you can see, if you look at the net change, it starts to increase, which is a good thing. I'm going to skip pages 10 through 18, but feel free to take a look at them. If you have questions, let me know, but not too much activity going in those.
Just a reminder, all your 200 funds, if it's a 200 number fund, those are special revenues. So the revenue's coming in with a special purpose. So we're limited on what we can use those funds for. That's why they sit in separate accounts. And there's not a lot of activity in a lot of these, but because they're special revenues, they just got to be separated out.
So the next page I'm going to is page 19, but again, feel free to flip through all those funds, look at them, but I'm going to talk about page 19 next.
The airport grant fund, Amy.
The only thing that's on this fund, so you see a $0 for expenditures. And the reason you see this is that there is already a purchase order intact that has been, that the city has. And the city, whether the city has to start paying for this yet this year, probably not. So what they're going to do is carry over that purchase order from 24 to 25, not close it out. You don't have to reappropriate for a purchase order that's already created as long as you don't close it. So that's why you see a zero expenditure, but it's not projected that the city is going to start receiving the grant dollars until 25. And it could, who knows if it'll all come in 25, but for forecasting purposes, that's where we put it. And that's where you see the advances in and out. Once the city receives those grant dollars, they will advance the money back to the general fund.
This is for the terminal project.
So the trick is, as we approach the end of the year, and there's purchase orders out there that we don't quite know where they're gonna fall, but the total dollars are on them, as far as expenditure and the money going out, is we don't wanna close them out, like has probably happened in the past, or they didn't get wrote at all. So we shouldn't go into next year and have as many then and nows.
That is correct. Now, the one
That's
thing we
the
are
thing.
doing is requiring our supervisors to take a harder look at which purchase orders to remain open, because it's been past practice, especially when funds were tight, for some supervisors to keep supply purchase orders open so that they could use last year's money next year. That's really not appropriate. The only thing you keep purchase orders open for are commitments you made this year that you aren't going to settle until next year. So it's not a slush fund. So we are going to do a better job of keeping open what should be open and closing what should be closed.
I presume that, it's just,
For example, this one, we've signed the contract for the construction for the airport terminal. They hope to get started yet this year, but because of the way they have to file the invoices, and then the invoices have to be approved by CMT, the consultant. We don't anticipate that we'll have any payouts yet this year. I mean, we could possibly, but the odds are it'll be 2025.
If we do, then we're gonna have to appropriate from the general fund for.
No, because we got the purchase order. As
Purchase
long as the
order's open.
purchase orders reserve those
You
dollars
can
for us.
create a purchase order. You should create a purchase order. The city should, once the contract goes out to bid and a contract has been awarded. Okay. Page 20 is the Brownfield grant, kind of like the FAA grant. Same thing, it's an ongoing project. A little bit of anticipation of additional grant dollars that are going to happen or be received in 25. And then the remainder amount that you see in contractual services is the remaining amount that a purchase order has not been intacted to receive that full grant. And I think the original amount was $265,000 for this grant. So this is just little carryover from the grant that was awarded for $265,000.
That's the service station?
It is?
The old Clark Station.
How about the one on Route 12?
That's a land bank project, so,
Oh, that's right.
but it is an ongoing brownfield project.
So I'm going to skip pages 21 to 23. Again, feel free to look at those. And we're going to go to the park fund on page 24. The only thing really on the park fund is you'll see obviously the income tax money. But in 25, you see an intergovernmental. That is the lockdown grant that the city is going to receive for the splash pad that the city has not received yet. And then the capital outlay number on this fund is going to change as well from the changes that we went over under the capital needs. It will now, those numbers will match in the updated one that you will receive because the capital needs changed in this fund. Again, with this, not enough income taxes received to operate the park fund. So the general fund and the transfers, and you see that's the general fund supplementing this fund to get it down to a zero balance.
This is the fund that's holding the donations.
Yes,
What was that dollar amount again?
326,000.
So that's included in that fund balances beginning of year.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip over page 25 and go to page 26. The only thing I want to point out on this fund, you will see an expenditure summary other in 2025 for $700,000. And what this fund can use, there is the McDougal water line. So the city can use this money. The way it's accounted for is they have to actually show the expense in the water fund. But there's a transaction where this fund can reimburse the water fund. And that's what you see the $700,000 for. And then I'm going to skip pages 27 to 37. Again, and we're going to go to page 38, the federal arborist grant. But again, feel free to flip through those. If you have questions, we can answer them. So on page 38 is the federal arborist grant, and this is grant dollars. So the only thing I want to, again, this is one of those reimbursable grants. So you see in the advances in and out, that's where the general fund is going to advance money to this. So to this fund, so cash flow can happen. Once the grant's received, it will advance the money back to the general fund. You can see personal services in there, contractual. I mean, this was a plan. I mean, I don't, if you have questions more so in detail on this, but this is how these grant dollars were intended to be used.
I had a question back on 32. The city cleanup.
Mhm.
What does that other entail? 146,400.
So what this is it's kind of an in and out. So the city receives bonds basically for foreclosed houses, basically.
Yeah, there's a requirement that if a bank forecloses upon a house, then they send us a bond until they sell it. And so that's where like, it hangs out there. Until they sell it, and then they apply to get. Take one like that.
So if you look at other revenue,
Right.
and that it kind of offsets itself.
So it matches up almost exactly.
Mhm.
Every other year.
Yeah, 2026. It's a little off again in 27.
Because you have some carryover.
Right. Okay. Other always concerns me, I guess.
Mhm.
Put a name on it.
Any other questions? Is everyone good with the federal arborist grant? Going through that? Then the next one, I'm going to skip over page 39, and we're going to go to the FEMA fire grant. Again, like the federal arborist grant, this one's FEMA. You see the advances in and out again. General fund has to advance the money for the cash flow. You can see that the capital outlay ties to the list. Again, there's another purchase order that has been created that is going to be anticipated not to close and carry over, so you don't have to reappropriate that fund or that account. Questions on that? So,
Question back on the arborist one.
yeah.
So we've got a lot of money we have to spend this year coming up on equipment, I take it?
Well, there's a lot of different moving pieces to that. The idea is most likely the hire a urban forester to manage the rest of the project. And the other pieces will be most likely in contractual services to get all the pieces and parts of equipment that they might use once they're brought on. And I think there's a few other things in that too, just to get everything up and running. But most of it is front loaded because of how we'll end up doing things, and there'll be the carry over that salary then over years and some contractual services, and really a lot of it is having a contract with someone to do a tree inventory, do a hazard tree assessment, and like a tree planting plan for the community that makes us eligible for state and federal dollars to plant more trees. And so that's why most of it's front loaded, really.
So I'm going to skip pages 41 and 42 and go to page 43. But again, feel free to look at those. And we're going to go to the 299 pension fund. And this is the fund we were talking about with the police and fire. So you see that basically 0.6 mils is sitting in the property tax number. That's what you receive for property taxes, again, taking the conservative approach. And then the state levy shares is really homestead and rollback on that. And you can see the personal services, and that is the pension for police and firefighters. So the difference in transfers in is what the general fund is supplementing into this fund for the police and fire pension retirements system.
And the reason year 26 is below 25 is the same as the general fund question.
That is correct.
That walks along.
That is correct. Page 44 is the general capital, which we've kind of already looked at. This is basically the details listed on that capital needs that we looked at for the projects that's sitting in capital outlay. This fund receives $200,000 a year for income tax that was voted by the voters. The debt service line item, you'll see that is in the amortization schedules in the very back. It's made up of the ambulance and fire truck debt that you acquired a couple years ago. And you can see it falls off in 2028. One of them does. I think one sooner. I'd have to go back and look, but one, I'm not sure which one it is, but they all fall off in 2028. The next one I'm going to go to, I'm going to skip over page 45 and go to page 46. This is the street capital. On this page, that intergovernmental where you see 500,000, that's going to be changed to $400,000 because the grant should have been 400 rather than 500,000 for 2025. And then this fund also receives 200,000 a year for income taxes voted by the community. And the capital outlay number, again, that was modified. It should now be 670,000 for that modification of the McDougal project. So you can see basically $200,000 that it's receiving every year is going to be spent on streets in this fund. The next page, 47. This is the infrastructure capital improvement fund. This fund receives $100,000 of income taxes every year. So you can see that forecasted out in the 5 years. In 2025, it's projected the city's going to receive an OPWC grant and loan for Central Avenue. So there's a grant, a loan, and a local portion. The local portion is going to be shown in the street fund. This fund here is showing the loan portion that is received. So there's $146,100 of OPWC loans. And it's also projected in here an estimated amortization schedule for making the debt payment back on that loan, as well as there's several other OPWC loans that exist for prior projects for streets that are in this fund. The other big project I think that's in this one is the is it the urban paving one? Yeah, which is again in the detail of that capital needs sheet. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast?
The ODOT stuff is in here. Just
Part of it is gonna be paid there, part of it out of the 200,000 that we'll receive for the street capital fees paid, we'll use that portion for that as well. There was a carryover, I think, of like $78,000 that we put toward it for next year as well.
And it's all identified on that capital needs page for the urban paving.
say there's 78,000 carrying over.
We're using infrastructure money we've been saving up for, I don't know, the last 5 years, give or take. $200,000 from that 1% tax will go toward it. And then there will, we used part of our Hancock permissive license plate money to do stench foam last year, so we're able to set that 70,000 as well toward that big project that we received.
I just had a question about all that. It's all great. I'm all for that. Is there any possibility that we can do from Circle K to Dillon Road? this year, 2025? Basically, you
Columbus Avenue.
pass Good Shepherd and then you're done right
Columbus
there?
Avenue.
No, they actually extended what we were, we talked about it a little bit. They extended what they were originally gonna do with this to begin with. That's why we're at roughly 850,000 that we're gonna owe 'em. And so we're trying to get into the next cycle that ODOT comes through so we can participate in the urban paving project again to get the, basically, it's in essence an 80-20 grant program through ODOT. And we're hoping that if we can, if that money, if the project comes in at really close to that 850 that we set aside, then maybe in a couple years, we can participate again with ODOT in their 80-20 urban paving to pick up where they stop there at 587 and take it all the way down, then catch up at, where they're gonna stop at Columbus Avenue and Lytle Street.
Well, the only reason I bring that up is that from Dillon Road to 587's not too bad. It's gonna need it in a few more years, but from Circle K on the corner there out to Dillon Road, past Good Shepherd, that is, Steve, you drive it every day. That,
I asked the same question.
And I dig what you're saying, but you know how,
they're not gonna,
we've been
there's
saving
no,
up for this thing for a
they
long
don't have,
time.
they don't believe in Santa Claus or the ODOT or?
Well, and honestly, where they came in from the city limits, from where they paved from Bascom and went all the way into 587,
Yeah.
that was a gift, so we don't question that. So that, they actually, there was no cost to us for that piece of it.
There is Santa Claus then.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they,
That's what
they
I was
just, they
hearing.
called one day and asked if we would pass that legislation, like I think it was last year, or the year before, and because they wanted to come all the way into 587, and they just said, because I asked them about it, like, no, we'll just bring it in, and
Okay, well, maybe just ask them if they can turn the corner there and go out there. That's a 1-day grind and a 1-day pave.
we were pretty happy that they
I know, you,
they went all the way to Columbus Avenue.
I know. I'm just saying
That's a
that, they're-
pretty big deal to get them to do that. It's, yeah, they're running a really tight budget themselves. And so, for us to pay, cause we had looked at maybe picking up that piece from Wood Street down to County Line where we didn't get from the County Line paving. And the mix that they use is so expensive that I don't know, we were looking at, I don't know, $600,000 or $800,000. I can't remember what the outrageous cost because of the mix. So the project that they're doing for us, their portion of it, if our portion is roughly 850, then that's only 20% of that project. So the ODOT cost, and you just math on that. So
Yeah.
What's the lifespan? If that material is so expensive, it should last.
It's
long.
supposed to last longer. That's the whole idea, but they've tried different mixes. So the mix that they're using now is even different than what they put on County Line. It's designed to not slide when trucks stop at intersections and make turns in and out of, like, onto driveways and cars make their turns into businesses. Made to not slide like it did the last time on County Line.
Right.
Before we paved it. So it's a pretty sturdy mix and it's crazy expensive. So I wouldn't want to take that on ourselves because that'd be a huge.
oh, you mean the portion I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I know we wouldn't want to
Get
take
them
it.
to do it,
Well, I'm just saying, they're right there. Turn the corner, guys. One more day.
Yep.
Grind it down, pave it back.
Actually,
If it's their idea, it's a pretty good chance it happens.
Yeah, I know it. But I'm just saying, can we plant that seed?
well,
we've planted several seeds.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
All
would
right.
be amazed, They have the city scope that they can pull up every street in the city and they can tell you where it's graded 1 through 5 as far as how rough it is and when it needs to be repaved. I'm not talking every street in the city, I'm talking every state highway as well.
Right.
Because when I met with them, I specifically asked them if we could do 2 projects. And they pulled it up and they said, one, no way, the other one, perhaps. So we're gonna apply for a grant for the other one to see if we can get it. But it's amazing the technology that they have.
Have deeper pockets than us.
Yeah, they got more money.
But,
than you.
and to go back on Santa Claus, that project that was done out there on mid-block and to the county line was all thanks to ODOT and Senator Reineke getting that into the transportation bill a few years ago. So we're running on house money right now.
Yeah.
That was I think that was a $1.2 or $1.5 million project that they just footed, so I'm okay with that.
Along that same line, quote unquote, transportation, and they just pump out 900 billion to the railroads? Maybe with all the money they're gonna be getting, maybe they could paint the underpasses.
Rising amount of that money in the state of Ohio is being granted to these short line railroads. That doesn't help us a bit. Like that one that runs through Tiffin,
Yeah, the one that goes from Tiffin to Woodville,
something like
Tiffin to
that.
Millersville.
Yeah, they just got a grant for that one. Doesn't have a train a week on it. But that's where a lot of that money's going.
That's why we're here, to ask the stupid questions, then we can get good answers.
Okay, so now we're going to go to page 48. This is the water fund. So what you see on intergovernmental, that is a projection of the lead grant for the city to receive grant dollars on that. So you'll see the revenue and you'll see the offset expenditure and the capital outlay. So it's kind of a wash. The other amount that you see in 2025 is the water portion for the Central Avenue.
The 850,000?
No, the 573,050 in 2025 is made up of 500,000 as well as 73,050 of the OPWC grant
Okay.
that's projected for Central Avenue. The 850,000 is, remember, in that one fund, it was Fund 239, I believe. There was $700,000 in the Fund 239. The other revenue there is that 700,000 reimbursing from that Fund 239 to the water fund, because the expenditure has to be shown in the water fund. But that Fund 239 is reimbursing the water fund. So that's what that's made up of. You see the increases, I guess, and under supplies and materials, you'll see that there was a decrease from 25 to 26. And what that entails is there was the cost of meters projected more in 25. That cost will go down in 26 of buying meters. So what I want to point out is if you look at the revenues, the charges for services, you can see the amount is the same. So that's kind of the base cost. If you scroll down to the third line from the bottom where you see revenues from charges for services new, that is the projected new revenue that is forecasted for the increase in rates for water. If you look at the net change in fund balance, the line above that, you can see that it's a deficit. So basically, more is being spent than what's being received. So in 25, you have $1.4 million, and we're projecting a carryover of 1.2. So that's right there dipping into that carryover balance for the water. So that's why you see the projected increases. So at the very bottom in 25, you see about a $341,000 fund balance. That's about a half of a month carryover. You can see it gets a little bit better projected in 2026, and then it starts to increase that it's getting better, which is a good thing. Is that enough to potentially get the city out? No, because I want to say 3-month operating carryover. So you're projecting a half of a month right now in 2025. So it's one of those things we're just going to have to
We're looking
continue.
at about $700,000 a month.
So if you look at 2027, it's about $1.2 million. That's like a 2.5-month carryover. So it's got to be close to that 1.2, 1 to 1.5, I would guess, something like that as a fund balance carryover.
So this is a good point for all of us to look at that because it's always very difficult to raise water rates.
It is. So I don't know details.
But this shows you that if we don't continue that trajectory, we're going to continue to deficit spend in these
got it.
funds. And we can't do that. We have to get that to where it's that 3-month carryover to exit the fiscal emergency.
What kind of percentage are we looking at on the increase?
I'm going to refer it to those guys.
The way we're looking at managing this increase is adjusting our fixed cost portion of the bill, the monthly bill, by $6 a month, and the unit cost by 40 cents, which is total increase on the average bill of $7.73.
That's in fiscal year 26.
26, 25,
25.
25,
Oh, okay.
25.
So will we be looking at that coming to us what time of the year?
So you do not approve changes in the water fund rates?
Okay, is it just the sewer?
So that's something that we'll try to get implemented. Our goal is to implement that realistically the first part of the year.
Okay.
Forecasted that in. We will come to you with legislation on Tuesday for the sewer, and when we get to the sewer, I'll share that with you, and there'll be enough time by presenting it on Tuesday to have a 3 reading on it.
What, do we know what the average water bill is per household in Fostoria? And I know it's gonna fluctuate, but what would the average be in general?
I had shared those from fiscal year 22 or whatever that I got from OWDA. And before our rates increased, we were like second to the lowest of
Right,
everybody around us. And Tiffin was $90 a month.
right.
I believe it was around $23, I think is what Todd, who works with us on this project, $23.30 a month is what I think.
It's still a pretty good deal.
So realistically, if you have over $100 bill, you either had the faucet on, watering the garden and yard a lot, or you got a leak
You
somewhere.
could have a leak.
Yeah, well, I mean, a family of 6 people might generate that kind of water bill.
Water bills jump to $800 a month, and that's a running toilet. I mean, just
Ugh.
Well, even somebody,
days and days and days.
even 200 a month for even a family of 5 seems, I don't know how you run that much water down the drain. Maybe 4 teenage boys showering 6 times a day, I don't know.
Teenage boys?
They don't shower.
I gotta question that one.
We don't have time to discuss that tonight.
Is there any other questions on the water fund? Okay, so page 49 is the sewer fund. Same thing with the water fund. So the intergovernmental revenue you see there is the other half of the Ohio Public Works grant dollars you're getting for, or projected for the Central Avenue. That charges for services line item, again, that's remaining flat because that's the base revenue received. And if you look third line from the bottom, the revenue from changes for new, that's the projected additional revenue with the sewer rate increase. One thing I want to point out in contractual services and personal services in 26 and 27, so you'll see contractual services went down, but personal services went up quite a bit. that's just basically a change. Right now, it's projected in 27 that the current sewer operator is now under contractual services, that will end, and that it will be in-house in 27. So that's why you see the personal service cost. It kind of jumps from contractual to personal. Yeah. This one, you're looking at a little over a 2-month carryover for the entire 5 years. It's pretty consistent. It's 2 months. Some of it's a little bit more. So for this one, you're probably looking at around probably like 1.1 to 1.2 to get a full 3-month carryover. So I don't know if Steve wants to go ahead and share those costs or those changes.
So you're going to see legislation on Tuesday proposing new rates, and it's going to reflect $1 per month increase in the fixed cost and a 50-cent per unit increase on the unit cost. The total of those two amounts combined, the average user is going to see $3.16 more per month.
Nobody likes seeing an increase, but we went for a long time. And it was out of a genuine concern for the taxpayers. Money was tight for a lot of people, and we put off some things that were probably going to be very difficult to try and sell to the public, but it's time to pay a piper now and start swinging the pendulum the other direction.
And we've done some things just on this Central Avenue project. Uh, we've taken the grant proceeds and shown the grant proceeds in the enterprise funds. The loan proceeds, you saw those back in the capital infrastructure so that the debt service on that doesn't have to be supported by the water fund rates or the sewer rates. So we're trying to do things to, I mean, that was a great opportunity. You don't always have that opportunity. And Cindy pointed out, this is something you can do so you don't have to put that debt service into your rates. So we moved it into that fund for that very purpose. So we're trying to do things to keep that lower, as low as we can, but we're playing catch up. You're right, Greg. It's catch up.
But
right now.
there's another component to the whole issue too, and that's the drastic increases in the chemicals to treat the water too. And the ongoing money for additional equipment as mandated by the EPA.
Any other questions on the sewer fund? Okay, and then we're gonna go to page 50, look at the stormwater fund. Not much to say about this one. The biggest thing that's happening in 2025 is the carryover for the Reservoir 4 wetlands project. The city is projected to continue to receive that grant dollars. That's where you see that $2.8 million. And then the 2.6 is the projected capital outlay that you'll see. There is some, again, carryover purchase orders that are occurring that won't be closed at the end of the year that will carry forward. But the stormwater looks okay as well. Not much to say about that. The other funds, not really going to go over. I mean, they're small. I mean, we went over the capital. If you go to page 62, just to point this out, we look at this every year. It's the report on the accounting methods, if you recall. I don't know how many years ago it was. Our office, when the city went into fiscal emergency, one of the requirements under Chapter 118 is that our office has to issue a report on accounting methods. And it's on our website, and it goes through what the Ohio Revised Code says, what the Ohio Administrative Code says that's required, and then at that time, what the city was doing, what was the process. So it'll talk about budgetary There's the chart of accounts. There's various sections in that report. So one of the things the city has to do before they get out of fiscal emergency is they have to address any audit or estate comments that was made in that report, that those all have to be addressed and fixed before being released. And so right now, a lot of the stuff that remains from comments I believe, have been fixed, but it's something that we will just have to continue to monitor, that it's continuing to be implemented by the time eventually when the city would come out of fiscal emergency. So that these were the comments from that reports from the section. So that's why you see in process on a lot of those.
So once we meet the other criteria, those can flip over to done. You're just
Yes,
gonna
as long as
monitor
there
them
still be, yes,
in the
because this,
meantime.
They're going to
This-
re-audit these.
yes, this is part of the termination report
Okay.
that all of this has been fixed. So yes, so we just continue to say in process because the city needs to continue to do what they're doing, but that's why we don't say, hey, it's done, because who knows at the time whenever the city would come out, yeah. And then pages 63 to 79, that is all of your debt. So page 63 is the summary. And then all from there is the amortization schedules for each one of your debt. You will see there are two debt projections that show estimated. There's no, one being the Central Avenue. There's not a set amortization schedule on that one. It's projected. And then there's still not a fixed amortization schedule for the OWDA CSO 2 and 3 project. The project's been done, but it hasn't been finalized and closed with OWDA, which I know we talked about to try to see why not. To get a set amortization, to get fixed payments of what your payments are going to be. So that's projected as well. I know we kind of went through that pretty quickly, but is there any questions anybody has? I believe so. So what will happen at next Tuesday's council meeting, I will go ahead, I will send Steve a new updated recovery plan for him to send out from the changes we talked about tonight. So you guys have that. And I will also prepare legislation, like we've done in the past, of the first reading to approve the financial recovery plan as well as the 2025 permanent appropriations. And that permanent appropriations will mirror the 2025 column in the recovery plan because they have to mirror the recovery plan.
Any other questions? Not entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Cassidy, a second by Lake. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Lehman?
Yes.
Sorry, Lehman? Kodak?
Yes.
Cassidy?
Yes?
Baker?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Lake?
Yes.
Thank you all, and we are adjourned at 7:16.